Welcome to Living Life in Love with Vitiligo. I'm your host, Mark Braxton from Raleigh, North Carolina. This is a global vitiligo awareness and education podcast. You will hear the true and authentic stories from people living with vitiligo. You'll also hear from their loved ones, medical professionals, licensed mental health therapists, relationship counselors, global vitiligo support foundations and organizations, and so much more. Sit back and enjoy living life and love with vitiligo. Once again, I'm your host, Mark Braxton from Raleigh, North Carolina. Welcome to Living Life and Love with Vitiligo. I'm your host, Mark Braxton from Raleigh, North Carolina. And I have a reoccurring special guest, and that is Nia. Welcome, Nia.
Thank you, Mark, for having me back. Love being here.
Thank you. So I wanted to have this discussion. I think it's very important for a lot of us out there. And this discussion is important to me as well, but it's about the stages of grief, what we can do to manage the grief in those moments, or how to, I guess, bring ourselves back when we find ourselves knee deep into grief and mourning and can't quite move forward. Although I do want to say this, grieving is important. It's important. But when you stay there, that's when you run the risk of, you can go into everything from mental health challenges and depression and all that. So I want to find, really talk to the listeners to give them some tools to help them and also to help myself, because as we both know, we both have had some challenges. I just recently lost my dad about a week ago, so it's still fresh. I'm sure I'm going through one of the many stages, but my dad would always tell me, you don't have to stop what you're doing, because he loved the podcast. He listened to it when it was on the radio. He watched a few episodes here. So I want to keep doing this. I want to keep supplying people with the necessary information to help them when they're having these challenges, and because I care, And Nia, you've also have had some challenges as well.
Absolutely. And which is why I am so grateful to you that we're doing this podcast, because, I lost my husband of 30 years back in March. So it's still fresh.
Right.
And, this is just a topic that a lot of times people will avoid talking about because It can be so heavy duty at times. So that's why I'm so glad you and I are talking about it today.
Right, absolutely. And and I really didn't write any notes for this because I want us to just really have this conversation from the heart.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of point out, some things I've heard, just recently, where people are trying to encourage me to cry, encourage me to do this and that. And I've shed those tears, I still, like I said, it's fresh. So I have those moments where I'm thinking about my dad, thinking about his life, even up his life, thinking about his life up until when he passed. And then even when he passed, seeing him at peace and knowing that he's in a better place, I think about that all the time, but I also still have to teach my students, and I come in and have conversations with my mom to make sure she's okay, because they were married for 56 years, and that's a long time.
Yes.
So I feel like that family's important. That connection with people is still important. So I try to still connect, and even connecting through the podcast, there are people listening I don't know, but I'm still connecting with them.
Right. Exactly. And I'm glad you said that too, just to make a distinction also, because sometimes I think people confuse and combine the definitions of loss and grief. And just for clarification's sake, loss is when you lose something, and it could be anything, a loved one, it could be the loss of a job, the loss of home. I think about the people that lost everything, with the hurricanes and stuff. It could be a loss of maybe some activity if your health changes. So, and sometimes people will just kind of poo-poo that, like, oh, get over it, that kind of thing. No, that's a loss to that person. And grief are the feelings that come up in relationship to that loss. And each individuals, we grieve differently and we're going to feel different things, but we're also going to feel some of the same things. So, I just wanted to make that distinction for people in thinking about that.
Right, absolutely. Because yeah, I've been there with losing a job and been there with, you go through things like divorce and all that. You do
Mhm.
have your moments where you grieve. You have your moments where you think about the past, you think about the present, you wonder about the future, and sometimes you wonder how are you going to get through this, and eventually you do get through it. But you
Mhm.
still have those memories. You still have those moments where it could be a song, it could be a food, it could be a smell, it could be
Yes.
somebody out there in public who resembles, a loved one, or it could be going into a business and you remember you used to work this type of job. So all
Mhm.
those things will bring up moments of grief, and it's how you handle those things that are important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And definitely, I hope, we can definitely talk about some of the ways to do that too. And, I just thought of another loss in working with someone today who just got diagnosed with cancer and is now going to, and they're grieving the loss of what their life was like pre-cancer and what
Right.
it's like now in terms of the limitations that they're experiencing, and they're grieving deeply over that. So, again, I think it's so important to have these kind of conversations so people can hear that, oh, so it's not just me. Other people are going through this stuff too, and help them not to feel so alone.
Absolutely. So let's talk about what are some of the stages of grief. I did a little bit of research. One article said 5 stages, one said 7 stages, and
Mhm.
let's just keep it basic. What are the stages of grief?
Okay. So, according to, I guess, what they would call the guru of loss and grief, it's a woman who wrote a book, God, so many years ago, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, and she identified 5 stages: denial, like, this hasn't happened, this person hasn't left me, or I haven't lost this, or just not denying what the reality is. Then there's anger. Well, why? Why did I have to lose this person? Why did they have to die? Why did I have to lose my home? Those kinds of things, and just getting really angry. And and I can certainly identify with this. Sometimes we get angry at God, like, why did you do this to me? I don't like it. Why did you do this? The third stage is bargaining. And this is, you know what? If you give me this back, I'll stop eating chocolate for the rest of my life, trying to kind of bargain and see if you can regain what it is that you lost. And that, becomes futile after a while, especially when you lose someone you love, realizing, you're not going to get a chance to have them back. Then there's the depression that can set in. And again, these are just normal stages. Um, and when the depression sets in, that's where the feelings of sadness and feeling down, fatigue, and wanting to sleep or cry all the time. So very natural course. And then finally moving into acceptance and just kind of getting to that place of, I don't like that I lost my loved one, but can accept it and I can move on and I can continue to live my life. And like you said, your dad said to you, keep it moving, keep it going. And that's really the acceptance stage. And what I found from working with people and myself also is we can bounce back and forth between those stages.
Right.
So, we might have been in denial for a bit and work through that, but find that the denial might come back at some later point. Or with the anger, we might have worked through that, but then find the anger might come back. So we can flip with those. But what we always want to be mindful of is work what is and deciding, what do I want my life to look like, say, without this person? That was the
Right.
question I had to ask myself. What do I want my life to look like now that my husband isn't here anymore? And I'm thinking your mom is probably kind of going through those same things herself. Being with someone for over 50 years, to me, is
Right.
just mind blowing, absolutely mind blowing. But so yeah, so those are the stages. We've got denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance.
Right. And I know the first four,
Mhm.
I'm gonna call those the typical four because we do like to deny when somebody passes away. It's
Mhm.
where you don't want to believe that this person is no longer with you, you know, and you want to just, you're like, no, that's not true. It's not true. It's not true. Even when you're at the memorial or the funeral, you still are in denial that this is what's really happening.
Exactly.
Um, the anger stage, I think, and I'm just kind of sharing my thoughts and opinion. I think it really depends on the person. Um, yeah, there are some people that are angry, they're upset, and I know some people right now that are in the anger stage.
Mhm.
Because they don't understand, why did you have to take this man from the earth, and you know,
Mhm.
and I get it, but I also feel that, just for myself, I can't go into the anger stage. Not to say that I won't, but I
Mhm.
feel like I can't go there because then I don't want that to affect my students or the people I come in contact with.
Mhm.
Um, not to say I will never get in that stage, I'm
Mhm.
just at that point where I gotta really make sure I'm being cognitive of what's happening, what's going on with me.
Right.
The
Right.
the bargaining, yeah, I think we've all been there. I'll, like you said, I'll do this if you bring them back,
Mhm.
or if you heal them, I'll make a change
Mhm.
as if we're in control of that.
You're right. Right.
Um, and then the depression, yeah, I say the depression is a natural thing. You fall into that moment where you're just kind of there. You're just kind of
Yeah.
numb. People ask you, how do you feel? I get that all the time. How are you feeling? There are times
Mhm.
I can say I'm good. There are times I
Mhm.
can say, I feel kind of, I'm still grieving. I'm still sad. There are times I can say, I don't know how I feel. And that's a
Mhm.
real thing. I don't know if I'm upset. I don't know if I'm sad. I don't know if I'm fresh. I really don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and I find that stage to be the most interesting part because I do feel like that is a part of depression where you just kind of like, I don't know,
Mhm.
can't answer it. And I know the acceptance phase will come in time, you know,
Right.
as you're healing. Because some people think, oh, I'm good now. I'm over it now. No, it takes time.
Mm. No. No. And I'm glad you brought that up about the depression piece, because that is an area that can get pretty unhealthy when people stay there, let's say for years and years and
Yeah.
years. And then that turns in what we call a complicated grief. So we know that, yes, you're still grieving, but you got stuck there. And so some mental health interventions could be needed, like therapy or maybe even medication or something like that. That's when it gets dangerous. But when people listening to people and they kind of skip over that they feel depressed or have felt depressed when they've lost someone, I get kind of, it's like, are you in denial about that? Or you just don't want to acknowledge that you feel those feelings because they don't feel good. Who wants to wake up feeling sad, or,
Right.
wake up feeling like, do I even want to get out of bed today? Because this person is gone. So it's really important to talk about that. And you made another good point about sometimes you don't know how you feel because there's so much stuff going on in your
Yes.
head and in your heart. It gets jumbled. And so it's like, well, I could pick a feeling, but I'm feeling 20 other feelings along with this one. So I don't know how I feel. I
Right.
really,
And, and I put off podcasting for about 2 weeks. And I said, because when Pops, got sick and went in to the hospital, I said, I'm gonna take a little break,
Mm-hmm.
not knowing he was gonna pass away. And then I postponed another podcast. Um, but I said, I need this. I need this opportunity to connect with somebody else, to talk. And not trying to be funny, but talk outside of the family.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Mm-hmm.
when you connect with family, we're going to talk about Pops, and we're going to talk about what he meant to us, and we're going to feel those emotions and feelings. But I felt like for me, I needed a different type of conversation, because I'm going to talk to my brothers. I'm going to talk to my mom. We're going to have those conversations. Like, I'm going to talk to other relatives, but I
Right.
also needed this other conversation that for a moment I can feel at peace and not have to, go into that headspace. And like you said, in your head and in your heart, you're trying to figure out, what are you thinking? What are you feeling? And
Mm-hmm.
don't know.
Exactly. Exactly. And I was laughing the other day. Someone asked me, "How are you doing, Nia?" And I said something like, I'm just having a day," because it was one of those days that I didn't really know how I was feeling. I knew I was feeling a little wonky, but
Right.
it's just, I'm having a day. I
Right.
don't know what
Right.
kind of day. I'm having a day, and it really is okay to do that.
Yep, absolutely. And I'm gonna say this to our listeners and watchers. If you're watching this, if you see us freeze every now and then, I figured out what's happening. I think we're gonna get a storm tonight. We got a
Oh,
little bit of cloud cover. You're in,
oh,
you're in a different part of the city. Usually we'll catch a storm coming from the southern part of Wake County and below. So
gotcha.
that's what's happening. We're getting a little bit of interference. But for our listeners, keep watching, keep listening. We're going to keep going in as far as we can. But if you
Exactly.
see it freezing, that's what's happening. Usually when there's any type of storm, or heavy winds, we get interference.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay.
Yep.
Oh,
But let I was gonna say, let me share something real quick, Nia.
mhm.
Um, when I got back to school, I went back to work, and I told you I was gonna go back to work. I needed that. Soon as I
Mhm.
walked in, the kids didn't know, to this day, they still don't know that my dad passed away. But
Mhm.
with me not being there, immediately they came to me, Mr. B, we miss you, giving me hugs, and
Mhm.
where were you? I was just like, we're family.
Mhm.
It it was the love I needed and not realizing it.
Mhm.
And sometimes, I was not gonna say sometimes, all the time, God has a way of putting people in your life to help you heal. Not completely heal, but in those moments, when you need a little piece of healing here, He's gonna
Mhm.
put people in your place. And I
Yes.
was getting it from the kids, like just the love they were showing, and
Yes.
them not knowing what was going on or what's happening.
Mhm.
But just to say, I miss you, I'm glad you're back. Here's a big hug. I'm like, man, I'm glad I came to work today. Although I was still feeling sad, I was grieving.
Mhm. Mhm. But how wonderful is that? Number one, kids are so intuitive, so they pick up on stuff, that we as adults may miss,
Right.
but they knew that they missed you, that something may not be quite right, but they just gave you their hearts. And I just think that is such a beautiful thing. I really do. What a blessing.
Absolutely. And I'm like I said, I'm gonna be honest, it still hurts, and it's gonna hurt for a while, because that was my dad. And as you know, my mom and I were his caretakers.
Right.
So we saw the different stages he was going through.
Mhm.
Um, we saw his moments in pain and moments when he's struggling. But then
Mhm.
when family would come over, he would perk up and I'm good.
Mhm.
We saw those moments. But the one thing I must say, even towards the end of his life, which I think he knew what was happening,
Mhm.
um, he was still in good spirits and cracking jokes and making people laugh. And,
Oh,
we didn't understand it. We're like, come on, Pops, this is a serious situation. And you sitting there cracking jokes. But
right.
I think he did not want us to feel sad.
Yeah,
He wanted
exactly.
us to remember that smile. you know,
It's
and that's something that stands out, that even in, I would say, maybe in our view, his darkest moment, in his view, may be his lightest moment, he
mhm,
was able to smile and bring a smile to us and the other people around him.
mhm, mhm. And what a gift of love from him to you guys, that
Yeah,
he didn't want you to worry about him. He didn't want you to be upset. And, he's thinking, let me just make them laugh and make it a little bit easier. So I think that's such that just speaks to his heart, I think, and the size of his heart, filled with
absolutely.
love, most definitely.
Absolutely. So let's talk about, when we're going through the different stages, what are some things we can do, or some tools? I like to say tools,
Yes.
um, it may not necessarily fix the situation or fix your heart in that moment, but can help you manage what you're going through, what you're feeling, or
Hmm.
how to interact with others. Because that can be a challenge,
Right.
interacting with other people that may not know what you're dealing with.
Exactly. And I'm really glad you said that. So we can talk about some things you can do, but there are two kind of, I don't want to call them rules, but I'll say guidelines that I go by. One is we all grieve differently.
Right.
So I'm not going to grieve. You grieve, you're not going to grieve the way I grieve. But there's no timeline on it. And what I mean by that is, 6 months down the road, please don't tell yourself, I should be feeling better than this, I should be over this by now. That's excuse my French, bull puppy. That really
Right.
is. And the second part of that is to not allow anyone to tell us, what, you still grieving? You're not over that by now?
Right.
Those are the kind of people I walk away from because you don't understand. Timeline is mine. And if it takes me a year or two, to get to a better place, that's my timeline. I have no business telling me that I should be over anything. So those are, like I said, the two guidelines that I go by in terms of just the process itself, for sure. And I also emailed you a couple of resources. One of them is Compassionate Friends. And I ran into that organization back in the 90s when I lost my daughter. And at that time, they were just a support group for parents who had lost children, but they've grown now. And it's a wonderful, most loving place of support when you've lost someone you love. And the other one is Grief Serve. And they will find support groups in your specific geographic area. So, if you feel like that's something that would be helpful to you, they'll help you find one either online or one that you can go to in person. So
Good. Good.
that information for sure.
Yeah,
So,
those are good resources. Because it's not just me. There are millions of other people out there that are grieving, that are going through similar situations, the same situation, and maybe in the process of getting into that, not even know it. And they're going to need the support. They're going to need the resources out there, because sometimes you feel like, I'm in this by myself.
right.
I got family, I have friends, they don't quite understand, but I need something else.
Hmm. Hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. So, with that, talking about things to do to help process your way, through your grief and all, one of the things that I recommend to folks is to find some kind of an outlet. And, and I'm going to use you as an example, Mark, because, you do art, you write songs, you do poetry. So you've got outlets that can help you to express some of those things you're feeling through those vehicles. And I think that's a wonderful, absolutely marvelous thing to have, and to have the talent to be able to do that. For other people, find some kind of outlet or outlets that
Right.
when you're feeling sad, and it could be it's something as simple as dog for a walk, or with me, and don't laugh, but when I start feeling sad or depressed, thinking about Michael and all like that, I start cleaning. My house is really clean. thanks, thanks to his passing, I live in a very clean house that you could eat off the floor, but it's an outlet. So an outlet or outlets are a very good way to help people, again, get those feelings out so they're not and eating away at you like cancer, because
Right.
feelings can definitely do that. Another thing that I recommend to folks is some form of faith, no matter what it is. Again, we're all different, different things work for different people, but draw comfort from the faith that you have in whatever that is, because that can be another kind of outlet. But I know for me, I talk to God, and sometimes I start talking to him as soon as I get up in the morning until I go to bed at night. But it helps me because, again, I'm not keeping it all bottled up inside, but I'm processing, and I'm saying, God, help me to understand this, or help me to get through this. Or, and this is another thing that's helpful, help somebody else. If you've got another family member or friend or even a neighbor or something, and they're going through something, reach out to them, because that's going to kind of help, take you or distract you a little bit from how you're feeling and thinking and everything, and be able to help and do something good. And you'll feel better about yourself after you've reached out to help somebody. Um, Definitely joining a support group if that's your thing. And I'm hearing the thunder, Mark. Um,
Right. So yeah, we're gonna talk for a little bit longer, but then yeah, we'll make sure we end this. That's
yes.
why our connection is the way it is. It's the storm that's coming up.
hmm So, but I other thoughts again, joining a support group, if that is something that you feel comfortable with. Some people aren't comfortable talking in a group, and if you're one of those folks, then definitely talk to a counselor, a therapist, especially those that specialize in dealing with grief, because these are people who have been trained to help walk you through the process and help you process your thoughts and feelings, and to come up with different. So definitely, getting, or even a life coach. So there are some really good life coaches out there too.
Right.
And one warning that I give to people is, when you're grieving, when you're going through this process, be careful how you use social media, because you can say, I'll use Facebook, for example. You could go on Facebook and talk about your loss and everything like that, but you might have some, for lack of a better word, trolls out here that might see that and want to make, devastating comments, and you certainly don't need to be subjected to that, as you're going through your process. So, I just tell people, be careful how you use social media. To get support, great, but when you start getting those wonky things, you might need to step back from that for a little bit. Um, okay, so we talked about interests, we talked about having outlets, facing feelings. Journaling is a great way.
It is, yes.
It's a wonderful way. I've journaled for years. I've got all of my journals, got a box full of journals, but sometimes when I'm just in that space of missing Michael so much, I'll sit down, I'll write him a letter in my journal, and I'll talk to him like he's still here, like, you will not believe what happened to me today, kind of thing. But it helps. I mean, it really,
Right.
really helps me. And one other piece is, make sure you're taking care of yourself physically, because a lot of time people will just kind of let that go, like their sleeping might be affected, they may not feel like eating, so that might kind of go by the wayside. So make sure you're taking care of yourself physically, trying to get as much rest as you can. If you need to speak with your primary care doctor or something to with a plan of action, definitely do that, because self-care is essential. um,
Absolutely.
and
And
one, well, I'm sorry.
No, I was gonna say I'm glad you said that. Because in the first couple of days I wasn't sleeping well at all.
Hmm.
I recognized it was tough, you know.
Hmm.
Um Saturday, yeah, I didn't sleep much Saturday, Sunday, Monday. What's today? Today's Thursday. Tuesday, I started getting better sleep.
Good,
Yesterday, I slept well. I'm going to
good,
sleep well tonight. So
good.
I think finding things to help me relax.
Hmm.
Music before I go to sleep. TV's
Hmm.
off, music's on. Sometimes
Yes.
writing. But you talked about journaling.
Hmm.
That's so important. And some people feel like I'm not a good writer. It's not about how well you write. You're just writing down your thoughts. If you don't have
Exactly.
paper handy, speak it into your phone. That way you
Yep.
have it in your notes section or record your voice. There's so many outlets and different ways we can do it, but write down those feelings.
Hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. The other thing too, and I'm going to be coming up on an anniversary, but we've got to prepare ourselves for the triggers of anniversary dates,
Right.
like birthdays and other special days. Um, like your dad's birthday or your parents' anniversary and things like that. So giving some thought ahead of time to, okay, that may be an emotional day for me, so I can do to take care of myself when that day comes up.
Right. And I actually have one coming up tomorrow. My parents were given a community award for the work they've done in the church, and they have um, a radio podcast they do. It's a prayer line and reaching out and helping people across the country.
Wow.
So they were told about this award, and this is before my father passed. And um, as he started to decline, we told the church, I don't think they're going to be able to go. So they asked me, would I pick it up in their honor? I said, yeah, I'll do that. Not realizing he was going to pass, but now it's like it's going to feel different. So
Yes.
I've been trying to prepare myself all week because I know I don't know how I'm going to feel when they ask
Hmm.
me to come up to receive the award. I don't know truly what I'm going to say. I didn't want to write it down because I didn't want to feel like it's a prepared speech.
Hmm.
I don't
Hmm.
always like to have prepared speeches. Surprisingly, people may not realize on the podcast, or maybe they do realize, I don't like to write down. I may jot down notes. It
Hmm.
might be one word, but I don't like to write down and be like, okay, so this is what we're going to talk about. No, I just like to have a conversation.
Yeah.
Um,
And I kind of think that's the best way, speaking from the heart, because what a great award that they're being given.
right.
And that's going to hear that with you speaking from the heart. So probably his words will be, channeled through you. That's kind of what I'm thinking is going to happen. So I'm glad you aren't going to
Yeah.
have a bad speech.
Yeah, and well, if it's my dad's words, he can be long-winded at times. So hopefully I can keep it short. um, but I could be long-winded too. So we'll see. Um,
Exactly.
but Nia, because the storm is coming up, is there any other tools or anything that you want to say? Because we're gonna wrap it up, but I would like for us to come back another day when we're not dealing with inclement weather, so
Yeah.
we could just recap and go over things again.
Definitely, definitely. The two things that I do just, want to really make a point of are allow yourself to grieve in your time and space. And please don't allow anyone or you shouldn't still be grieving because that's disrespectful, to the memory of our loved ones. And it's disrespectful to you because no one is inside anybody else's body, so you don't know what someone is feeling. So to tell me that I should still be grieving and all, you know, thanks for sharing. Have a good day.
Right,
Um,
absolutely.
and leave it at that. And taking care of yourself, the other big piece. Because I fussed at you when you told me you were going back to work, and I said,
Yes,
but now I take that back after I hear how the students, were just so loving and wonderful. So
Yeah,
I take
and I it's okay. I needed that. I needed to be around people because I think had I been in the house, then that depression would have set in.
yeah.
It took me about, I say about 15 minutes to really get my day started. I told my students, I said, give me about 15 minutes. I'm gonna put on a video, some music, let's relax, then I'll be ready.
Hmm. Hmm.
And after that time, I said, okay, let's go. Time to teach. So you got to give yourself that time. I often say we know what's best for us. And I knew I needed to be around people, and I just want to put it that way. Even though it was hard, I still needed to see faces. I needed to hear voices, and not my own. Yeah.
And believe me, I understand because I didn't follow my own advice and I went back to work like 2 days after the funeral.
Yeah.
I was back. So yeah, I'm not one. I don't know why I was fussing at you when I did the same thing. So
Well, but that's okay. It seems like you want a sense of normalcy. I think
yeah,
that's it. If you're used to working, and I know everybody's life is different, everybody's occupation is different, but sometimes you want that sense of normalcy, although you know that there's a missing piece in your life now. And you can't fill it up with something else, but you can still be around people who still work, so you can feel whole, but you can't feel that whole, if you get what I'm saying.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Definitely.
But Nia,
So
I'm sorry, I'm gonna cut it a little bit short. We're gonna do a part two. For the listeners, this is still gonna be up here. We are dealing with some inclement weather. It gets severely hot during the day, and then it storms, and of course, when it starts storming, they pop up whenever they feel like it.
yes. Yes.
So I just want to make sure we're safe, and next time, hopefully, the connection be much better when we talk. But the information is still there. Even if you look at this video, there'll be information at the end that you can stop it, pause it, look at that information. So if you need support, just know that there's help out there for you. And just remember, it's okay to grieve. Nobody's going to tell you how long you need to grieve, but if you feel like, you're stuck, just know there are some tools that you can use to help you get through it. And we named some of those tools, but like I said, we'll come back and do another, just to recap all the things we've said. Just in case some people couldn't pull some things from the video, we'll recap it and talk, and I guess kind of see where we're at.
Absolutely.
So Nia,
thank you, Mark.
You're welcome. You're welcome anytime. Anything you want to say before we go to the listeners, and then I'll wrap us up.
Just don't be afraid to ask for help. It's okay. And just to kind of piggyback on the preparing for triggers thing, one of the things that I do for my mother's birthday every year is I plant a tree somewhere. And so then I go visit them and talk to her. And that for me is just a way that I honor her memory. And, it's a connection. I have one in my backyard, and, I'll go talk to the tree. But thinking about ways to honor your loved ones is also another way to help yourself heal. It really, really is. So definitely give that some thought, but just know that you're not alone. You're not alone in no way, shape, or form.
And so maybe I should go get a donut tomorrow morning. My dad is a retired baker, and that was one of the great memories of him bringing home some donuts for us to eat. So maybe I have to go get me a donut. Yeah,
I think so. And eat one from me too, definitely.
No, I'm just going to get one. I'm not going to be greedy. I'm just going to get one. and look, and for our listeners, I thank you for tuning in. Just even though if we are having a heavy discussion, because talking about grief could be heavy, you also got to find time to smile and laugh, and life is hard in itself, and we are going to go through challenges. We're going to go through things, if not with loved ones, sometimes within ourselves, but you got to find those moments to laugh. moments to smile, to say, you know what, if I'm not all right tomorrow, guess what? I'm going to be all right today. Things can happen in a moment, but you know, try to smile, try to laugh. Laughter is important.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
And healing. Definitely.
Absolutely. And healing. So you have been listening and watching Living Life and Love with Vitiligo. My special guest is Nia. We were talking about grief, the stages of grief, and what we can do to help us get through it. We'll come back with the part 2 because we are dealing with inclement weather here in North Carolina. So I will talk to y'all later. Y'all take care.